think we're live on YouTube now. Just give a few moments for the participants to join, and then we'll make a start, inshallah. Okay, we'll make a start, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه يا ربنا لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك ونصلي ونسلم على أفضل خلق الله سيدنا وحبيبنا ومرشدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا متقبلا يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أما بعد, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. We begin in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of the worlds, and we send our peace and blessings upon the final messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon his family, his companions, and all those who follow in his footsteps until the day of judgment. Alhamdulillah, by the mercy and generosity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have been able to come together this evening at this blessed time on the day of Jum'ah between Asr and Maghrib. Is really a precious time when dua is accepted. It is a time to make adhkar and salawat to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These are some of the good actions that we do on Yawm al-Jum'ah in particular. And it is a time that we are gathering and remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any sorts of gatherings where we are talking about our faith, our religion, from the Quran, from the Hadith. These are gatherings of remembrance, gatherings of dhikr, and these are highly rewarded, and we know all the virtues and blessings of such gathering. Today's presentation is around post-Ramadan blues and how do we beat it. So Ramadan is over, and it's natural for us to feel a sense of sadness after the month of Ramadan, because it is a month of blessing and virtue, and it is a month in which we immerse ourselves in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we witness all of the blessings and extra reward that we find in the month of Ramadan. So when the month of Ramadan passes, there is a sense of sadness that the believer feels. But at the same time, there is the lessons that we take from the month of Ramadan in order to be able to continue with those good deeds throughout the year. And in today's presentation, I just wanted to spend a moment or two reflecting on that. And I want to share my screen with everyone so that you can see the discussion. So the subject of today's presentation is post-Ramadan blues, ways to beat it. I want to ask a couple of questions to start us off. And it's a question that I just want you to think about and reflect on. First question is, what do you miss most about Ramadan? What is it about Ramadan that you actually miss? Sometimes we have a sense of feeling which we can't really pinpoint unless we take a moment to think about it. So I just want you to take a moment and think about, what is it about the month of Ramadan that you most miss? Is it the fasting and stay away from food and drink? Is it the evening Taraweeh prayer that you were praying this year with your family because the mosques were closed? Is it the time of iftar that you come together as a family and break fast because iftar is a moment of joy, as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ says? What is it about the month of Ramadan that you miss the most? And second question I want you to think about is, what made you strive harder in Ramadan? What is it about Ramadan that really pushes you to put greater effort in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is it the fact that everyone around you is worshipping and fasting and doing more good deeds? Is it the fact that it is the month of extra reward, and it's that multiplication of reward that really pushes you to do more? What is it that really encourages you to do more in the month of Ramadan? I just want you to kind of think about that, because that's part of our self-awareness process. Sometimes if we're able to pinpoint things more specifically, then it allows us to capture the benefit of those things and then grow using that. So just take a moment to jot down, what is it about the month of Ramadan that you missed the most? And what made you strive harder in the month of Ramadan? The three things that we take away from the month of Ramadan can be summarized in these points. Firstly, we know that the month of Ramadan is a month of God consciousness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we have prescribed the month of Ramadan as it was prescribed to those before you, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that you may attain taqwa, awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God consciousness. So taqwa, an achievement of taqwa, is one of the key objectives and takeaways of the month of Ramadan. So as we are now in post-Ramadan period, we need to see if we have really taken that away with us. Are we carrying this greater level of consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Do we have a heightened level of taqwa? Second is finding meaning and purpose. Because the month of Ramadan is the month of Quran. And the Quran was revealed as guidance for mankind, as we have heard many times in the month of Ramadan, that the month of Ramadan is a month of Quran, and the Quran is hudal linnas, is a guidance for mankind. Quran gives us meaning and purpose. So in the month of Ramadan, as we engaged more deeply with the Quran, we studied the Quran, we read and recited the Quran and read the translation, all of that should have given us a better sense of meaning and purpose of our life and how we should conduct our life. So as we leave the month of Ramadan, this is something that we should take with us, a greater sense of meaning and purpose. And the third thing that Ramadan gives us is a sense of self-discipline, because we are staying away from food and drink, things that which are halal normally. But in the month of Ramadan, we are controlling ourselves from all of these desires, controlling our eyes, our tongue, our ears, our organs from anything that would earn the displeasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Ramadan really gives us that heightened level of self-discipline. And as we know, fasting is sabr. And that's what we attain from the month of Ramadan. So out of the many benefits that we can list about the month of Ramadan, three things that I feel that everyone should really take away from the month of Ramadan is, number one, this God consciousness, taqwa, heightened level of God awareness. Second is finding a deeper meaning and purpose to life and knowing how to live our life according to the Quranic guidance. And third is a heightened level of self-discipline. So one of the questions that we need to ask ourselves post-Ramadan, 2 weeks out of Ramadan, is just to take a moment and say, okay, what is my level of taqwa compared to how it was before Ramadan? I'm not going to compare with Ramadan, because Ramadan is really a month where we completely immerse ourselves and everything is amplified. But even if we were to compare before Ramadan, is my level of taqwa, God consciousness, slightly better than how it was prior to Ramadan? Approaching the month of Ramadan, was I kind of in a state where I wasn't clear about, the real purpose of my life? Of course, we all know that our purpose is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but sometimes we forget, or we are somewhat distracted by the attractions of this dunya. Post-Ramadan, are we feeling a sense of deeper meaning and purpose in life, that our life is really to worship and seek the pleasure of Allah? Are we now more attached to the Quran and the Quranic message and the Quranic guidance? And thirdly, are we able to really discipline ourselves. In Ramadan, we stayed away from things that we don't have to stay away from now, but there are other things that are haram throughout the year. Am I able to control myself and stay away from those things? Because that's what Ramadan should have built within us. So again, I want to pose that question to everyone here is, do we take these three things post-Ramadan, and are we carrying these things with us in the months that have now followed, and the days and the weeks that will come? So it is again a moment to reflect on those things, because we know that the Lord of Ramadan is also the Lord of Shawwal, which is the month that we're passing through now, and all other months of the year. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala isn't just present in the month of Ramadan and then Allah disappears, good, na'udhu billah, and then comes back the following year and says, remaining 11 months, you can do what you like. That is not how we as believers worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know that Allah is the Lord of Ramadan, and we worship Allah in the month of Ramadan, and we worship Allah throughout the year. So this is something that would help us re-engage with in terms of our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So keep in mind the fact that the Lord of Ramadan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is also the Lord of Shawwal. Allah is ever present and He is witnessing us all the time. So the connection and the worship that we need to commit to needs to be something that is consistent throughout the year. We also know from the scholars that one of the signs of acceptance is continuation of the good deeds of Ramadan. So Ramadan comes, and if we have done some amazing things in the month of Ramadan, if we see that post-Ramadan we've gone back 100%, we've gone back to how we were prior to Ramadan, then that's a worrying sign. Because the sign of acceptance of our good deeds in Ramadan is that there is an element of continuation. That doesn't mean we are praying the 8 rakat or 20 rakat of evening night prayers and reciting hours throughout the day and fasting every single day. No, it doesn't mean 100% continuation, but it means that there is an element of goodness that we carry forward post-Ramadan. And if we are able to do that, then that is a sign that our good deeds have been accepted. So this post-Ramadan period is absolutely critical, actually. It's absolutely critical. It's vital that we take a moment and spend that time asking ourselves those questions that I've just posed to assess where we are after Ramadan. Because the day of Eid and the day of celebration can often make us forget about everything and return to a state that is exactly how it was prior to Ramadan. And then we have lost all benefit of Ramadan. That shouldn't be the case. So 2 weeks that we've now spent in the month of Shawwal, it is really a time for us to pause and ask ourselves these questions. Are we carrying on with these things? Have I been able to carry some of the good deeds post-Ramadan and continuing with that? And that's where I just wanted to kind of take a moment and talk about Ramadan activities and how we can carry on with these things throughout the year. What is it about Ramadan that really motivated us? And those good actions that we did in the month of Ramadan, are there virtues and blessings in doing those throughout the month of Ramadan, throughout the year, not just in the month of Ramadan? So if we look at those activities, Ramadan is the month of Quran, yes, and that's when we really immerse ourselves in the Quran. But we know that the Quran is the book of Allah and it's there in our houses. The Mus'haf that we are reciting in the month of Ramadan is still there with us. The app that we had on our mobile phone of the Quran is still there on our mobile phones. So what is stopping us from opening up that Quran, opening up that Mus'haf, just the way we did in the month of Ramadan? Maybe we can't recite as many hours, but how can we ensure that we are having a daily dosage of the Quran throughout the year? And that is the key thing. Quran is something that we need to build that relationship with. So Quran, for example, Surah Kahf is to be recited every single Friday. And there is huge blessing of reciting Surah Kahf on Friday. Reciting Surah Mulk, there are blessings of that, Surah Yasin, and reciting the whole Quran, any verse, as we would normally recite in the month of Ramadan. The recitation of the Quran carries that reward all the time. And we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment will be asking the reciters of the Quran to recite and elevate. And their rank will be at the station where they recite the last verse. And that is not something that is confined to just Ramadan. If we can be people who recite and engage with the Quran, understand the Quran, practice the Quran, then we will be those people that can be reciting and elevating ourselves in higher ranks of Jannah. So maintaining that relationship with the Quran throughout the year keeps alive that spirit of Ramadan throughout the year. So this is one of the activities that we do in Ramadan, but it shouldn't be that we've parked and put our Mus'haf away and we've not opened it. If it's been the case that since Ramadan, we haven't opened the Mus'haf for a single moment, then that is worrying for us. We can't be believers who leave the Quran or abandon the Quran for such long periods. So one of the things that I would encourage all of us to do is try and maintain a daily connection with the Quran. In Ramadan, you recited many surahs and many minutes and hours. Outside of Ramadan, even if it means one verse, even if it means 5 verses, half a page or 1 page that we recite every single day, find that fixed moment, fixed time in your daily routine where you would be engaging with the Quran, even to a small extent every single day. Make it that source of spiritual nourishment that you take in on a daily basis. That way we're maintaining that Ramadan feeling and that relationship with the Quran throughout the year. Second is fasting. Yes, in Ramadan, fasting is compulsory and we fast 29 to 30 days consecutively. And that is the month of fasting. It's the days of fasting, month of Ramadan. But that doesn't mean that we can't fast any other days throughout the year. There are blessings of fasting Mondays and Thursdays, as we know. There are the blessings of the 3 middle days of the lunar month every single month, the fasting of Ashura. So there are many specified fasting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has instructed the Prophet ﷺ and told the Prophet ﷺ about the virtues of these fasting, and the Prophet ﷺ has taught us those days of fasting. So one of the things that we should also commit to is that until the next Ramadan, let us identify a few days where we will be fasting. Now, I understand fasting is not something that is easy for everyone. Some people find fasting quite easy, and you'll find many brothers and sisters who are fasting, every other day, or fasting on Mondays and Thursdays every week throughout the year. For others, that's not the easiest of worship. And it may be the case that we're not able to do that as often. But there should be 1 or 2 days, or few identified days, few of those special days throughout the year that we try and make an intention to fast. That way, we're experiencing that feeling of Ramadan when we're fasting in other months and other days of the year. So carry that spirit of fasting throughout the year. Third thing that we do often in an increased capacity in the month of Ramadan is Qiyam, because the Prophet ﷺ says that whoever stands in the night in the month of Ramadan with the Iman and Ihtisab, all of their past sins are forgiven. So this is something, again, we can do throughout the year. It shouldn't be something that is just for the month of Ramadan. Maybe in the month of Ramadan, we did it every single evening, either Taraweeh or Qiyam before Suhoor. But we know from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes to the lowest heaven, Sama'ul Ard, the lowest heaven, every single night. Not just the month of Ramadan. Every single night of the year, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes to the lowest heaven and he asks, who is there calling upon me? Who wants mercy? Who wants forgiveness? So standing in prayer during those nights and praying, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there to respond to our call. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of course, would do qiyam all the time. Now, evening prayers and those qiyam is not mandatory upon us to do every single night, but we should try and identify some time, 1 or 2 nights. Maybe, we did it every single night in Ramadan. Let's try and do it once a week or once a month or once every 2 months. Identify that time within your routine where you would say, yeah, this is, I've got no work the next morning. I can wake up for Fajr, it's time, but let me wake up just half an hour before that and do 2 rakah prayer and carry on. And that way we're kind of igniting that spirit of Ramadan by doing qiyam again throughout the year. So the reward is not something that is only confined to the month of Ramadan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there to give us reward for that special prayer, tahajjud prayer, which is a very important prayer. And there are so many virtues of that prayer. It is the true believers that would stand up at night when everyone else is sleeping. That is one of the characteristics of the mu'min, of the muhsin. So let us try and pick up that quality of trying to identify a few nights in the whole year where we would come up and do some extra prayers as we have done in the month of Ramadan. Sadaqah is again the other thing that we do in the month of Ramadan. We spend a lot of charity in the month of Ramadan, and that was the case with the Prophet ﷺ, that he would give increased amount of charity in the month of Ramadan. And often we're giving our zakat because zakat is calculated on an annual basis, and we have our zakat fixed date in the month of Ramadan. A lot of people have that. But again, sadaqah shouldn't be confined to just Ramadan. We should be in the habit of giving charity throughout the year. So make it a weekly thing, or whatever your capacity is, through direct debit or otherwise, to give in sadaqah on a regular basis. Try not to just do it through direct debit where it's just going from your account without you feeding it or without you actually consciously giving it. One of the things with direct debit is, yeah, it's good, it's going automatically and you're getting the reward. But in terms of you consciously realizing that you're actually giving and you're making that effort and your family and your children are seeing you give, I think that's also a very, very important practice that we should have. So sadaqah is again something that should be done continuously, and the need doesn't end for the poor and the destitute and for various causes just as Ramadan finishes. Those needs are still there throughout the world. So let us carry on with an element of sadaqah throughout the year, and that way we're keeping the spirit of Ramadan and sadaqah alive as well. Dua is something that we do, but dua is something, again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling upon us, as I said in the earlier point about Allah coming to the lowest heaven and asking, who is there to make dua? I'm here to respond. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is closer to us than anything else. So Allah is listening to us. Allah is all hearing and he responds to the dua. So let us keep that practice of making dua throughout the year. And I think, and that's one of the things, again, is often not a regular habit of a lot of people, where you are actually consciously sitting down and raising your hand to Allah and making dua from the bottom of your heart. In Ramadan, we are seeking forgiveness, we're raising our hands, we're crying, tears are rolling down. And outside of Ramadan, we do our prayers and we do other good deeds, but often we don't find the need to raise our hand and make dua. We feel that we've done it in Ramadan and let's hope those duas get accepted. That's not how it should be. Again, this practice of dua and being connected to Allah is something that we need to maintain throughout the year. It's not something that is again confined to Ramadan. Allah isn't just there to accept your dua in Ramadan and not do so throughout the year. Dua is something that we should maintain a level of continuity throughout the year. And final thing that I want to highlight here is the point about character building and self-control that we really build within the month of Ramadan. By fasting, our desires and our appetite is suppressed, and we engage in a sense of self-control, self-discipline that we find difficult outside of fasting and outside of the month of Ramadan. But as we know that, committing sin and engaging in things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us not to will be something that is sinful outside of Ramadan as well. So how we ensure that we're not looking at something that we shouldn't be looking at, we shouldn't be doing things that we shouldn't be doing. All of that level of self-control and self-discipline is something that we need to maintain throughout the month of Ramadan. And as I mentioned earlier on, that's one of the things that we should take forward from Ramadan: taqwa and self-discipline, sabr, the self-control element that needs to be carried on. And if we are able to maintain all of these things of recitation of the Quran, some selected days of fasting, qiyam as frequently as we can, giving sadaqah, keeping the dua regular, and maintaining this awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this taqwa that we've built within the month of Ramadan, and realizing that this is something that we need to maintain throughout the year, then what we're essentially doing is carrying that spirit and learning and practice of Ramadan throughout the year. And then we can start to taste the sweetness of Ramadan in other months as well. This sense of worship and connection that we have, this sweetness of iman that we sense in the month of Ramadan, we can start to sense that. We can start to taste that in other months as well, inshallah. So it's really, really important that these activities that we have done in Ramadan, which we often kind of confine it as Ramadan activities, are actually activities that we do all year round. Maybe not at the same volume and same intensity, but at some capacity. It shouldn't be abandoned. That is the key thing. We shouldn't abandon all of these ibadah, all of these acts of good deeds that we increase in the month of Ramadan, but we shouldn't be abandoning those acts outside of Ramadan. There should be a level of continuity to some capacity, inshallah. So this is why one of the things that we say is that what we should seek from Ramadan is transformation. Seek transformation over motivation, because motivation is something that helps us in our transformation, but that is not the end result. If it's just about being motivated, we're not going to be able to achieve what we need to achieve. What we need to achieve through Ramadan is a sense of change, an improvement, a transformation that allows us to get closer and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that the dearest of actions to Allah is that which is done regularly, even if it is small. So that is the summary of what we are really talking about. Ramadan comes and we do all of these great good deeds, but outside of Ramadan, one of the things that is most dearest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is those actions that we carry on with, even if they are small. But regularity of those actions is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. So the dearest of actions to Allah is that which is done regularly, even if it is small. That's what we understand as habits. So one of the things I want to kind of talk about in this final segment is around developing habits. Because if we're able to develop habits, then those good deeds becomes much more easier for us to do without us really trying to force ourselves, because they become habits, and habits are things that are done in an automatic way without us having to think about it. And we know that habits are the small decisions we make and the actions we perform every single day. And this is why they say that our life today is essentially the sum of our habits. And according to one of the research by Duke University, habits account for about 40% of our behavior on any given day, meaning that 40% of the things that we do every single day is just passive routine. We wake up, we go to the bathroom, we brush our teeth, we come out, we put our clothes on, we do this, we do that, go to the kitchen, have breakfast. You know, that routine, we don't even, it's just very passive. It's habitual. It's something that we don't have to really think or, really force ourselves to do. So if we can include huge amount of good action within as part of those habits, as part of that 40% of activities, that behavior that we do on a daily basis, then we're essentially kind of making those good deeds that we did in the month of Ramadan part of our daily habits throughout the year. So in order to develop habits, one of the things that we always say is that we should start with small habits. And this is where what we say is make those habits so easy that you can't say no. You can see this graph here, where if the habit is so easy, i.e. the motivation level to do that habit is so low, then you can easily do it. But if the habit is not as easy and it requires an element of motivation, you really need to motivate yourself to do it, then you'll see that it's something that fluctuates. So where you see the line A, the motivation level to do that habit is high, and you'll find that you can't always do it. But action B is very easy. So you can do that as consistent habit. To give you an example, if you say, I'm going to read the 1 juz of the Quran every single day with translation, and then I'm going to try and memorize another 5 verses. If you say that is going to be too scary. That might be too hard for you to do. For you to be able to really sit down and read 1 juz and with translation may mean that you need 1 full hour or 1.5 hours to do that. And you probably won't have that time every single day. Whereas if you say, actually, I'm going to recite 5 verses from the Quran, just 5 verses, I'm not going to recite more than that, then that becomes much more of an easier thing. You don't really need to motivate yourself. You can, so it's only going to take me, a few minutes. I'm just going to open my mouth, recite those 5 verses and put it away. So in developing habits, it's always good to start with very small habits, something that you can almost do without you even thinking about it. It's going to be so easy for you to do. Even if you're so tired after coming home after an exhausted day, you're not going to say, oh, I can't do that today. It's going to be too hard. I'm feeling so tired. That's not going to happen to you, because the habit that you've chosen is so small. It requires very little motivation. It's very easy to do. You'll do it, and it will be something that you do consistently. And that's why it's really, really important to make it so easy that you can't say no to that habit. Secondly, increase habits in small amounts. So as we said, start off with small, maybe 5 verses, and increase it in small amounts. Success is a few simple disciplines practiced every day, while failure is simply a few errors in judgment repeated every day. So if you increase by 1% every day, then over a period of 1 year, you see a significant improvement. Likewise, if you were to miss a good deed every day, then over a period of 1 year, you'll make a significant loss. So it's really, really important that make small improvements, increase your habit slightly. So, if you're reciting 5 verses, increase it to 6 verses, then increase it to 7 verses, increase it slowly so that you're not, making it too difficult for you. And then when you think that you're ready to increase a bit more, then you increase a bit more. And then you'll see a substantial change. And this is what, a lot of specialists do. Even the British cycling team, when he was taken over by one of the coaches, he applied a 1% increase in everything that the British cyclists do, which led them to become one of the most successful cycling teams. He didn't want to completely change everything. He said, their sleeping pattern would improve slightly, their diet would improve very slightly, their training habit would improve very slightly. He didn't say you're going to have a drastic change in your sleeping pattern, you're going to have a drastic change in your diet, you're going to have a drastic change in your training habit, because that would just not work. Small changes, small increment in each of the areas led to a full transformation that led to their huge success. So that's one of the kind of ways of inculcating habits, is to increase those habits in small amounts after you've have built that practice within yourself. And the other kind of important point about building habits is that the best way to improve your self-control is to see how and why you lose control. Never miss twice. There's always going to be a situation where you were supposed to do something, but you couldn't do it. But that's an exception. For example, people who have breakfast every single day, they don't have to work really hard to have breakfast. They'll come to the kitchen before work, even if it's a quick bowl of cereal, they'll have that. If it's another weekend, they'll make themselves a bigger breakfast. Breakfast becomes part of their normal habit and dietary need. But there may be occasions where they miss their breakfast, but that doesn't lead them to then miss their breakfast forever if they've given up breakfast. This is why if you miss once, yeah, they may have missed breakfast one day, but next day they'll pick up having breakfast again. So that practice is carrying on, and it's part of their routine because it's habit. You may miss it once, but never miss it twice. And that's really, really important, because as soon as you, and if you think about it, how many times have you picked up this habit of going to the gym regularly, and other habits that you started doing, but then you missed once, and then you said, oh, I didn't go yesterday, I might as well miss again. And before you knew it, that habit's out the window. You're not going to the gym anymore, or you're not jogging anymore, or you're not cycling anymore, or you're not doing the reading that you said you were going to do. You're not reading that reading anymore. It easily happens, unless you are very conscious that, okay, I missed one day, exception, that's fine, but I'll need to pick it up. Even the elite athletes, they would miss, they'll drop the ball. There will be occasions where they can't do something because of a particular circumstance, but that doesn't mean they give up completely. It will be something that they pick up straight away again. So be very careful when you're developing good habits, never to miss twice. If you miss once, say, no, I missed it yesterday, today is not going to be a miss. Stick to a pace you can sustain. Sustainability is really, really key. And you can see from this graph where if the effort that is required is very high, and then sustainability is low, that's where A is where your effort is, you don't need much effort, then you can really do it very regularly, because it doesn't require effort. Even when you're lazy, you can do it. It's very sustainable. Something that requires too much effort, then the sustainability comes down. You can't sustain it. So finding the optimum zone of long-term growth, they call it, is where the effort is just the right amount for it to be regular. If it requires too much effort, then it's not going to happen. If it's too less effort, then it becomes something that isn't really as impactful as it could be. So by picking up a small habit and slowly, gradually building it to a situation where you think, yep, I've got it to the right amount. If I increase it anymore, then it requires too much effort and my ability to sustain it is going to drop, then that's the peak that you want to hold on to. That's the point of long-term growth. So if you say, 5 verses a day, for example, going back to that example, and you find, well, actually 5 verses is so passive, it doesn't even take me 1 minute to recite. Then, and you want to just keep it at that, and you say you don't want to increase it, then that's a bit of a lazy kind of approach. Increase it slowly, as we said in the other points, small increments, small increments, to a point where you think, okay, I've now reached 1 page. I'm reciting 1 page with its translation. That doesn't take too much effort, but if I increase it anymore, then I might not be able to maintain it. Then that is your that's the point you want to hold on to. Don't keep increasing and don't decrease, and hold on to that optimum point of long-term growth where it's not a lazy approach and it's not a burnout approach. It's in that optimum zone that you're operating. So by building it from a small scale and slowly building up, you identify that point in developing habits. So how can we develop new habits by taking this approach? One of the things is that you pick up 1 or 2 habits. So you are 2 to 3 times more likely to follow with a habit if you make a specific plan of when, where, and how you're going to implement it. Be very, very specific. So if we go back to the Quran thing, I'm going to recite 5 verses of the Quran every day after Fajr, on my prayer mat. Yeah. And that is very, very specific. You're going to do your Fajr prayer, you're going to remain on your prayer mat, and you're going to recite those verses before you get up. So that is very, very specific. And if you are specific about it, not just every day I'll recite 5 verses, but you don't know when it's going to be. And then the whole day goes by, you're thinking, no, I'll do it later on, because you don't have a specific time allocated. You haven't fixed it. And therefore, it's not locked in. And you can easily miss it. So this point that we mentioned earlier, never miss twice, that becomes much easier. You miss it twice, you miss it 3 times, 4 times, and slowly that habit will just go away. So making that implementation state intention is absolutely critical. The other thing is one habit at a time. Don't pick up too many habits. They focus on one habit until it becomes a habit, and then pick up another thing. So if you're, reciting the Quran, let's make that one a habit before you say, I'm going to read this and I'm going to study this and I'm going to go and exercise and do, so many other things. Pick one thing up, focus on that. Once that becomes regular, then pick another habit up. And then, for each one, they say it takes about 2 months for it to become automaticity, they call it, of that habit, whereby you don't even have to think about it. It's just become part and parcel of your regular routine. And as long as you don't miss it twice and sustain it, then it will carry on with you. So keep these kind of practical points in mind as you develop good habits post Ramadan. And if we can really take that step, one of the things I shared with another group earlier on this week was this realization that Ramadan brings. And for me, I was able to really relate to this, that Ramadan is when you are able to assess your potential. This Kurt Ham, he's a founder of Outward Bound course, where you go, it's Outward Bound courses, this outdoor activities that you go center in different parts of the country, where you go away and they engage you in those challenging activities, abseiling, canoeing, mountain climbing, expedition, and so on and so forth, really pushing you to test yourself, see how much you can take, and really bringing your potential out. And this is what they say, that we are all better than we know. If only we can be brought to realize this, we may never be prepared to settle for anything less. And Ramadan brings that realization for us, that we are actually better than what we thought. Suddenly we're able to fast 30 days, when outside of Ramadan, we can't fast a single day, let alone single day. If we miss our breakfast by 11 o'clock, we're like all kind of thirsty and very hungry. But, we are able to fast nearly 18 hours, 19 hours in the month of Ramadan without any food and drink. Ramadan, we're just about able to do our prayers outside of Ramadan, and suddenly in Ramadan, we're able to do Taraweeh and wake up at night and still kind of wake up early and go to work, and suddenly we're feeling so energetic. That potential, Ramadan makes us realize that human beings, as us, as individuals, we should never underestimate ourselves. The potential that we have to do good is amazing, is huge, is significant. If only we are able to realize this, we won't settle for anything less. We will completely keep pushing our standards, keep pushing ourselves to have better targets in life, higher ambitions, so that we can grow and be more closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So with this, I want to conclude, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. We pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enables us to continue with the learning, continue with the practice and lessons that we have learned in the month of Ramadan, and increase us in our ability to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and inculcate all of these good habits so that they become part and parcel of our daily life, inshallah. Wabillahi tawfiq, jazakumullah khairan, subhanakallahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.